Alleluia. Om Mani Padme Om. Allah Satnam.
Welcome. You're watching Harmony and Diversity, and today we're speaking with Jan Lester. She's the Director of Public Affairs for the Church of Scientology in Melbourne. Thanks for coming in, Jan.
Thank you for inviting me.
As we do with this program, you're, as I just described, Church of Scientology, you're involved in that, but let's have a look at the background of how you got to be there. You've got a background as a teacher, haven't you?
That's right. So a teacher, I've been teaching about 38 years, I think now. It sounds a long time. And I was always interested in how children learn. And probably as I got more and more into it, I'd get more and more frustrated about it because I'd see children who were having trouble.
Right.
And so I would look into ways of finding out different techniques to use, way I could arrange my room, all of these sorts of things. And I did a subject called diagnostic techniques at university. And then I probably changed my viewpoint a little bit because then I started to really look like then I was really delving into the whole area.
Yeah.
And then when I had my own children, I decided that I needed to find an alternative. I needed to look and see, I didn't want them to be messed up, I suppose. I didn't want anyone to interfere. I wanted them to be themselves. So we started looking at an alternative route, and they went to an alternative school.
Yes.
But funnily enough, a couple of the kids had trouble with their reading and writing. We'd left that alone. We'd just been parents, and the teachers were responsible for that.
Yes.
So when it came to high school, had a little bit of a problem there, and they weren't up to speed. And also too, I wanted something that was a bit more spiritual than the norm.
Okay.
Then during the course of all of this, I had a couple of problems there. I didn't quite know how to solve those. And a friend rang me, and I hadn't seen him for 25 years. He was someone I'd gone to school with. So I met with him, and we had a coffee, and I told him about what I'd been doing and the problems that I had at that moment, which were quite big for me at that time, because I didn't have a solution. So that makes them even bigger,
Yes.
you know, if you don't know what to do about it.
That's right.
And I can remember standing at the car park at my car thinking, wow, he made a lot of sense. Like I was able to tell him like what was going on in my life at that time, but normally you do that and you feel okay for a minute and off you go and, oh, it's still there. But he actually gave me some tools, and he's a Scientologist, and I thought, I want to know a little bit more about this. So that was the beginning. Yeah.
And so, how do you become a Scientologist? It's a church, but you don't take vows or anything like that, do you? How do you do that?
Well, what happened was we found out about study technology, which is developed by Mr. Hubbard, the founder of Scientology. And my daughter was having a bit of trouble, as I mentioned, with the reading, and she had tutoring for about 6 weeks. And the tutor used study technology. And my daughter, after 6 weeks, was reading. And I said to my friend, she doesn't stop talking. Like, she was a quiet kid. She doesn't stop talking. And he said, she's literate. And I thought, my goodness, what is this? So that was, I guess, when back to your question on that, is you learn different principles or different tools and apply them to life. And the more I did that, the more I could see that this helped me and it helped my family. And then one day I just thought, I'm a Scientologist. And that was it. It was just a choice, a decision that I made.
Well, we were discussing before the interesting potential for someone to be say, a devout Catholic or some other religion, and still be a Scientologist as well? Those two are compatible?
Yes. Well, Scientology, it's not a dogma, it's not a belief system. So no one tells you what to believe in or what you should believe. So you could have any belief. It's not going to interfere with that. It's about life. It's about being able to better handle life and feel better about your life, have the tools to handle different things. It's not about what you should believe in. It's not a faith as such.
Yeah, but that goes directly to the point you're making about your introduction to it.
Yes.
It's because there were tools which
Yes.
came to you, which got you interested in the first place.
That's right, yeah.
It's very interesting, but I'm noticing that in your lapel there's a cross, which sort of is a Christian symbol. Explain that.
Well, if you have a look a little closer, it's actually has 8 points.
Okay.
So
it's got a star in the middle of it.
Yeah,
sort of.
well, we call it a cross,
Yes.
but it has 8 points to it. And what the 8 points represent are the 8 urges or the 8 dynamics towards existence or survival. So I'll tell you what they are, because it probably sounds a little confusing.
No, please do, please do.
All right, so the first one is the dynamic of self. So that's about looking after yourself. It's about being yourself. It's about all the things you do in regard to you as a person.
Right.
The second one is the creativity dynamic, which has to do with marriage, raising of children, so anything that's related to that dynamic of creativity.
Right.
The third one is the dynamic of group survival. So groups as in might be your church group, sporting group, swimming club, that's the third dynamic.
Right.
Fourth dynamic is mankind. Fifth dynamic is all living things, plants, animals, anything that has life. The sixth is mess, like the physical universe, which mess I say is matter, energy, space and time. So anything to do with the physical universe. And the seventh is the spiritual dynamic, which is the person himself, as opposed to a body.
Yes.
And the eighth dynamic is the supreme being or God dynamic, or it can be also described as infinity. So it's that dynamic or that goes on forever.
That's an amazingly appropriate point to notify we're out of time.
Yep.
We don't have infinite time, but we'll be back in a moment. Welcome back. You're watching Harmony and Diversity, and we're speaking with Jan Lester. She's the Director of Public Affairs from the Church of Scientology in Melbourne. And before we went to the break, you were describing the 8 points of the crucifix with the star. And I'd like to examine those as we go through, because clearly they're a critical part of understanding Scientology. Now, the first of those was self. Now, how does that manifest itself?
So self could be related to anything. It could be just study, going and bettering your knowledge in some area. Could be related to getting dressed, looking after yourself, taking care of the body. So it's just anything at all to do with self on that regard. But in regard to Scientology, we have courses people can study. So, for instance, if I wanted to be a better educator, I can actually do a course on study technology. If I want to be better at raising children as a mother or a grandmother, I can do a course on happily raising children, or one about teens and tweens. So that is going to build my ability or my knowledge, and I would have better control in those areas. So I'm looking after myself at that time.
What's the basic premise on which these courses are based? If they're not theological, what's the thrust? Is that
Well, at the church, there are two sides. We have counselling, which is we call auditing, And auditing is about finding past experience in life that is causing a person distress or misemotion. And they're run by a trained auditor, which is a lot of training goes into becoming an auditor. An auditor means one who listens.
Yes.
So people will come to the church for counselling, spiritual counselling or auditing. And the more that they do, the better they feel about themselves, because they're actually getting rid of things from the past that are holding them back.
Right, right.
And the other side is training. So people come in to actually train to be auditors.
Right, right.
And we also have courses that are called life improvement courses, where people might come in, as I mentioned, the Happily Raising Children course, or study technology. One of the basic ones is called Learning How to Learn. So some people come in to do courses or training. Some people come to train to be an auditor, or others come to do counselling.
Now, there is something that you do which is sort of like the personality type test. So is that part of that as well, for a person to get to understand the true essence of themselves?
Yeah, well, what the personality test does is it shows a person, it depicts a person's personality.
Yes.
Things like their communication skills, things like whether or not they are able to be like motivated in life. There's about 7 or 8 of those different traits that can be picked up on the personality test. So what that does then is the person who is helping him find the thing that he wants to handle in his life at that particular moment can look at this. So if the person is low, he has a graph, comes from the personality test, and if he's low, say in the area of communication, then our staff member would suggest that he do a communication course.
Right.
So he actually gets better skilled in that area.
So it's very much about self-development, isn't it?
Yeah, it's about self-development, but with those dynamics that I mentioned earlier, if I am not doing well, say, in my second dynamic, which is with my partner or my family, I'm not going to be doing so well on my first dynamic, because I'm going to have attention on that. And so what we try to do is balance out those 8 dynamics. So this idea of coming in and doing a course, say, on raising children, is not actually going to just make me feel better, but I'm going to be better in my second dynamic.
Before we go on to that second phase, perhaps it might be time to sort of, because we're talking about self.
Yep.
And I'll just go back, and this is from the Scientology website, so it's official quotation, is just to get an idea of how self regards self in this context.
Yes.
The first of them is, man is an immortal spiritual being. Okay. Now that's a state of mind, that's a belief. Now, how does that get inculcated in someone who's sitting doing a course?
Okay.
How's that presented to them?
All right, so we have, in our church, we have this amazing public information centre. It's a multi-video centre.
Yes.
So, and with lots of different areas that they can look at. And one of them is Dianetics, one of them is Scientology. So little basic tools there are depicted in videos, and people can learn about, like what you're talking there is that about the 3 parts that we say that we have. Man has 3 parts to him. He has a body, he has a mind, but he is a spiritual being. So the spiritual being part there is the person himself, me. So we don't say you have, or we actually, Mr. Hubbard calls it a thetan, which comes from the Greek letter theta, which means spirit. So we don't say, I have a thetan. We say, I am a thetan. So they can learn that way. So we do, people are educated on those sorts of things. And it might be that they don't need to know that for the communication course, but they learn that a little bit as they go along.
And I don't mean to put stumbling blocks here, but we were talking before about I could be a devout Catholic and I could be a Scientologist. There's a potential there for there to be a bit of a conflict with my Catholic beliefs. To, even though I think it's a reasonable observation, But so someone who's doing that, and they're a devout Catholic, and they're doing the course, but they're not prepared to accept the fact that I am an immortal being. How do you manage that?
Mr. Hubbard says that it's only true if it's true for you.
Okay.
So he says, you don't believe everything I say, you find it out. Scientology is an applied philosophy, it's a technology.
Right.
So when we're studying, we actually apply it to our lives as we go along.
Tell you something else that applies to life, it's time. We're out of it.
Okay.
We'll be back in a moment.
Allah. Alleluia. Allah.
Welcome back. You're watching Harmony and Diversity, and we're speaking with Jan Lester. She's the Director of Public Affairs for the Church of Scientology in Melbourne. And we're just talking about a very interesting point about whether or not you can be devout in one religion and still partake of the considerable training and basic support of Scientology. And you were pointing out that Mr. Hubbard had made a particular point in relation to that. How does that go?
He said that what is true for you.
Okay.
So no one is going to force you to believe in something. You would check it for yourself. Yeah, and if you don't agree with it, you don't agree with it, and that would be the end of it.
And not agreeing with that basic premise would not affect the effectiveness of the courses that you're talking about.
No, that's right.
Yeah.
In regard, my personal experience with the three parts of man, I've not had anyone who says, I don't believe that. But I've not asked them, do they believe that? You know, I say this is an underlying belief in Scientology that we do believe we're spiritual beings, and we do believe that we've lived before. But I don't say, do you believe that?
No.
So if they don't believe that, it's fine. Yeah, and if they didn't want to sort of take that up, then they wouldn't take it up.
Yeah, so it fits into the concept that many people carry, that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. And so as long as you allow what the spiritual experience is we're having to be what they want, well then that's acceptable. So clearly, that's thanks for answering that. Now, the second point, which is you just alluded to then, that we are immortal spiritual beings. How do you find that? Do you find that there's people trip on that, or that's...
Mr. Hubbard, before Scientology, Mr. Hubbard actually discovered Dianetics. And Dianetics is the modern science of mental health.
Yes.
And it's about the mind. And he would discover things, and then he would go and test it, and discover things and go and test it.
Right.
And he found through Dianetics that people had actually lived past lives, because they were repeating, people, different places were repeating the same stories or the same things, which made him realise this people have lived before. And so when he found that, through the extensive research, he realised, of course, that there was more to us than just a body.
Yes.
There was something else there. There was something, a spirit.
So, sort of a continuum.
Yeah, there was a continuum. So something had to be continuing. It wasn't a body. So what was it? Spiritual being. So that's where he discovered that. And that was where Scientology was actually born.
Really born there, right. We might come back to Dianetics later. Okay, there's a third point here. This is humankind. His experience extends well beyond a single lifetime, which you've basically addressed. And he has capabilities which are unlimited, even if not presently realised. Now, there's a big one.
Yeah.
So that's saying we're full of potential. Where does Scientology fit into us being full of potential?
Okay, so if I just give you a really simple example of that. I mentioned the way that I got into Scientology through my teaching. And I discovered this study technology. So study technology is about helping someone able to study. overcome barriers to study. So if you have a child in a classroom who's having difficulty with their study, they're not going to be feeling good about themselves, and they're actually not going to be able to use their full potential in that situation. So once they get this material under their belt, they are able to learn and then go wherever, into whatever field they would want to. But if they can't because of a learning difficulty, they're not going to be able to be living their full potential. So that's basically what Scientology does, gives the tools. If I'm not good at communicating, if I'm shy, I do a communication course, I feel more out there, more confident.
More confident.
So I'm going to be able to then live with more potential than I would have had if I hadn't done the course.
Right.
So it can be divided up into all those little bits, which you can then sum up into the big. Once you've done lots of different things, I'm going to have more potential than if I hadn't done them, because I've got more skill or more competence or more confidence in that area. Yeah.
So it's all about where we come from, what our purpose is, and getting the best out of it. And I'm just getting back here to have a look at Scientology further holds that man can be basically good, and that his spiritual salvation depends upon himself, his fellows, and his attainment of brotherhood with the universe. Now that's a pretty interesting observation, because that rolls over into ecological issues and population issues and a whole range of things. How does that fit into the church's program?
Probably goes back to the 8 dynamics. Like a little bit like if I was stranded on an island all alone, I'm not going to do very well. If I'm conscious of those other dynamics that I have, then I'm going to, and then if, say, like you look at universe is sort of encompassing the whole.
Yes.
So if I care about mankind, because it's one of my dynamics, I will want to get out there and do something about the world. If I care about my second dynamic, my family, I won't just say, see you later, guys, I have a connection with my children, even when they're grown up. So that then, it's best summed up really with the 8 dynamics. If you look at what you just said in regard to the way they're described.
Yes, I can see that. It's all sort of coming together, and that's an important. It helps to understand the whole thrust of Scientology, because it says here that the ultimate goal of Scientology is true spiritual enlightenment and freedom for all. Now, we're going to be approaching getting out of time, so I need to ask you, will you come back next week before we answer this question? Will you come back next week?
I'd love to, yes.
We're just about on the threshold of something here, and we need to follow it through. So just repeating that, listen, so we'll start next week on this. The ultimate goal of Scientology is true spiritual enlightenment and freedom for all. So we'll look forward to following that through. You've been watching Harmony and Diversity. We'll be back next week, and we'll be speaking with Jan Lester again. Thanks for watching, and bye for now.
Baha'u'llah, Shanti Om, Allah.